Maya Torres stepped over the broken concrete and twisted metal that used to be Michigan Avenue. The morning sun cast long shadows across what remained of Chicago. 3 months had passed since the Zerathi ships came from the sky and turned Earth into a graveyard. Maya still remembered the sound of the energy weapons as they tore through the city like angry thunder. She led her small team through the ruins with careful steps. Behind her walked Lisa Hayes, a former military commander who now helped organize the survivors. Dr. Kate Sullivan followed close behind, her medical bag heavy with supplies they desperately needed. The fourth member of their group was different from the others. Zarathal stood nearly 7 feet tall, with pointed ears and silver hair that seemed to glow in the pale light. She was an elf from the Celestial Dominion, one of the few alien races that called humans their friends. The team moved slowly through the destroyed streets. Maya had been a marine biologist before the war started. She used to study ocean life in peaceful laboratories. Now she spent her days searching through rubble for anything that might help the remaining humans survive another day. The Z had killed over 3 billion people in their first attack. The survivors lived in camps scattered across the dead planet, always hungry and always afraid. Lisa stopped near a collapsed building and held up her hand. She listened for any sounds that might mean danger. The Zerathi still sent small groups to hunt for humans who had escaped their initial assault. Lisa had been a commander in the Earth Defense Forces until most of her soldiers died in the bombardment. Now, she protected whoever she could with whatever weapons she could find. Kate knelt beside a pile of debris and pulled out a strange device that looked like a scanner. She had been studying something unusual in the past few weeks. Some humans who survived direct hits from Zerathi energy weapons were not just living through the attacks. They were changing in ways that science could not explain. Kate believed these changes might be important, but she needed more time to understand what was happening. Zarathal watched the humans work with sad eyes. Her people had arrived too late to help in the first battle. The elves brought medicine and food, but they could not bring back the dead. She had been assigned to work with the human survivors and report back to her government about their condition. What she saw worried her more than she wanted to admit. Maya climbed over a fallen wall and discovered something that made her heart race. In a basement beneath the ruins, she found 6 people who were still alive. They had been trapped for weeks with very little food or water. What shocked Maya was how healthy they looked despite their terrible situation. Their skin seemed to glow with a faint light, and their eyes were brighter than normal human eyes should be. Kate rushed down to examine the survivors with her medical equipment. The readings she got made no sense at all. These people should have been dying from radiation poisoning and starvation. Instead, their bodies showed signs of rapid healing and cellular regeneration that was impossible according to everything she knew about human biology. When she asked them about their experience during the bombardment, they all told the same strange story. They remembered being hit directly by Zerathi energy beams during the attack. The weapons should have killed them instantly. Instead, they felt a burning sensation that seemed to wake something up inside their bodies. One of them, a young girl named Amy Chen, demonstrated something that left everyone speechless. She placed her hands on a piece of broken metal and watched it slowly reshape itself into a perfect sphere. Lisa immediately contacted the main survivor camp through her radio. Commander Patricia Stone, who now led what remained of Earth's military forces, needed to hear about this discovery right away. The implications were enormous. If humans were developing new abilities in response to Zerathi weapons, it might change everything about their chances for survival. Zarathal stepped away from the group and activated a communication device that connected her to the elven fleet orbiting Earth. She spoke in her own language for several minutes, her voice growing more urgent with each word. When she finished the conversation, her face looked pale and frightened. Maya asked her what was wrong, but the elf only said that she needed to speak with her. superiors immediately. The team spent the rest of the day helping the 6 survivors return to the main camp. During the journey, Amy Chen continued to demonstrate her unusual abilities. She could make water flow upward and cause small rocks to float in the air around her hands. The other survivors showed similar but less developed powers. Kate took detailed notes about everything she observed, knowing that this information might be crucial for human survival. When they reached the camp that evening, news of the discovery spread quickly among the survivors. Some people were excited by the possibility that humans might be developing ways to fight back against the Zerathi. Others were frightened by the idea that their own species was changing into something unknown. The camp leaders called an emergency meeting to discuss what should be done. Dr. Sullivan presented her findings to the assembled group. She explained that the survivors showed genetic changes that appeared to be activating dormant sections of human DNA. These sections had been inactive for thousands of years, but Zerathi energy weapons seemed to trigger their awakening. She admitted that she did not understand how this was possible, or what it might mean for the future of humanity. Zerathal finally revealed what had made her so worried during her communication with the Elven fleet. Her people had been monitoring Zerathi military transmissions, and the news was not good. The aliens were preparing a massive second wave of attacks, designed to eliminate every remaining human on Earth. The Zerathi commander had declared that humanity must be completely destroyed within the next few months. Maya felt a cold fear settle in her stomach as she listened to this information. The camp held fewer than 10,000 survivors, and they had almost no weapons that could damage Zerathi ships. If these new human abilities were their only hope, they needed to understand them quickly. She volunteered to work with Dr. Sullivan to find and study more people who had been changed by the alien weapons. As the meeting ended and people returned to their shelters for the night, Maya stood looking up at the stars. Somewhere among those points of light, an alien fleet was preparing to finish what they had started. She touched the spot on her shoulder where a Zerathi energy beam had grazed her during the first attack. The wound had healed unusually quickly, and sometimes she felt a strange warmth spreading from that place through her entire body. The war for Earth was far from over, and Maya was beginning to suspect that the next battle would be fought by humans, who were no longer entirely human. The question was whether these changes would save her species or transform them into something that the galaxy would learn to fear once again. Amy Chen sat in the medical tent while Dr. Kate Sullivan attached monitoring devices to her arms and head. The 12-year-old girl had become the most important person in the survivor camp, though she did not understand why adults kept staring at her with mixtures of hope and fear. Amy only knew that strange things happened when she concentrated on objects around her. Maya Torres watched from across the tent as Kate recorded the readings from her instruments. The numbers on the screens kept changing in patterns that made no sense according to normal human biology. Amy's brain activity showed wavelengths that had never been documented in medical science. Her cellular regeneration rates were 50 times faster than normal, and her body temperature remained perfectly stable, despite the cold morning air. General Patricia Stone entered the tent with heavy footsteps and a grim expression. She had been receiving reports from survivor camps across the planet, and the news was both wonderful and terrifying. Humans everywhere were developing abilities similar to Amy's powers. In the ruins of New York, a man named Robert Kim had lifted a collapsed building with his bare hands to rescue trapped children. In what remained of London, a woman called Helen Park had somehow communicated telepathically with survivors who were miles away. Kate looked up from her equipment and shook her head in confusion. She had been studying genetics for 20 years, but Amy's DNA samples showed changes that should have been impossible. Entire sections of the genetic code that had been dormant were now active and producing proteins that did not exist in any medical textbook. These proteins seemed to be rewriting Amy's entire biological structure from the inside out. Zarathal stood near the tent entrance. her silver hair catching the morning light as she spoke quietly into her communication device. The elf had been in constant contact with her superiors since the discovery of the changed humans. Maya could tell from Zarathal's body language that these conversations were not going well. The Celestial Dominion was becoming increasingly worried about what was happening on Earth. Amy suddenly sat up straight and tilted her head as if she was listening to something that no one else could hear. She told the adults that she could sense other people like her scattered across the planet. Their minds felt warm and bright in her consciousness, like distant stars that were growing brighter every day. Amy said there were thousands of them now, and the number was increasing rapidly. Maya felt a strange tingling sensation in her shoulder, where the Zerathi energy beam had wounded her. The feeling had been getting stronger each day since they found Amy and the other survivors. Sometimes she caught herself moving objects without touching them or knowing things that she had no way of learning. Maya was beginning to suspect that she was changing too, though her abilities were developing more slowly than Amy's. Dr. Sullivan made an announcement that shocked everyone in the tent. Her analysis of Amy's genetic samples had revealed something extraordinary about human DNA. The dormant sections that were becoming active contained information that was incredibly ancient. The genetic patterns suggested that humans had possessed these abilities before, possibly thousands of years ago, but something had suppressed them. Zarathal suddenly ended her communication and turned to face the humans with an expression of deep concern. She said that her people needed to have an important conversation about human history. The elf explained that the Celestial Dominion had records dating back tens of thousands of years, and these records contained information about Earth that had been classified for good reasons. General Stone demanded to know what the elves were hiding about humanity's past. Zarathal hesitated for a long moment before explaining that humans were not originally from Earth. Their true ancestors had come from a distant star system and had been known throughout the galaxy as the Terrans. The Terrans had been a warrior race with incredible abilities that allowed them to conquer entire solar systems. Maya felt her blood grow cold as she listened to this revelation. Zarathal continued her explanation, describing how the ancient Terrans had built an empire that stretched across hundreds of worlds. They had enslaved other species and used their enhanced abilities to maintain control through fear and violence. The Terran Empire had been the most powerful force in the galaxy for over 1,000 years. Amy asked what had happened to the Terrans and why humans no longer remembered them. Zarathal explained that eventually, many alien species had joined together to fight against Terran rule. The war had lasted for centuries and had devastated countless worlds. When the Alliance finally defeated the Terrans, they had made a terrible decision about the survivors. Instead of executing the remaining Terrans, the Alliance had used advanced genetic manipulation to suppress their abilities and exile them to a remote planet called Earth. They had also altered Terran memories so that future generations would not remember their violent heritage. The plan had worked for thousands of years, allowing humans to develop a peaceful civilization while their dangerous abilities remained dormant. Kate suddenly understood why the Zerathi had attacked Earth with such determination. If they recognized that humans were descended from the Terrans, they would want to prevent the awakening at any cost. The Zerathi had been one of the species enslaved by the Terran Empire, and their hatred for humanity's ancestors ran deep enough to justify genocide. Maya stood up and walked to the tent opening, looking out at the survivor camp where thousands of people were struggling to rebuild their lives. She realized that many of these people were probably developing the same abilities that Amy possessed. If the genetic awakening continued to spread, humanity would soon become something that the galaxy remembered with terror. General Stone asked Zaruthal why the elves had not told humans about their true history before the Zeruthi attack. The elf explained that her people had hoped the genetic suppression would remain permanent. The Celestial Dominion had been monitoring Earth for centuries to ensure that human abilities never reawakened. The alliance between elves and humans had been partly motivated by a desire to keep humanity peaceful and contained. Amy suddenly cried out in pain and pressed her hands against her head. She said that she could feel something dark and angry approaching from space. The sensation was like a storm made of hatred and fear, growing stronger as it moved toward Earth. Dr. Sullivan's instruments immediately detected massive spikes in Amy's brain activity as the girl accessed information that should have been impossible for her to know. Zarathal activated her communication device and spoke rapidly in her own language. When she finished, her face was pale with fear. The fleet had accelerated their schedule and would arrive at Earth much sooner than expected. Veltar, the alien war chief leading the extermination force, had declared that no human would be allowed to survive long enough for their abilities to fully awaken. Maya felt the tingling sensation in her shoulder intensify until it spread throughout her entire body. For a brief moment, she experienced a flash of memory that was not her own. She saw vast starships moving between planets, armies of enhanced humans conquering alien cities, and the faces of species that cowered before Terran might. The vision lasted only seconds, but it left her shaking with both fear and something that felt disturbingly like hunger for power. General Stone began issuing orders for the camp to prepare for another attack. She knew that their small collection of human weapons would be useless against Sarathi technology. Their only hope lay in the changing humans and their developing abilities. Stone ordered Kate to identify and catalog every person in the camp who showed signs of genetic awakening. As the day progressed, more reports arrived from survivor camps around the world. The number of changed humans was growing exponentially, and their abilities were becoming stronger with each passing hour. Some could manipulate matter like Amy, others showed enhanced strength and speed, and a few had developed telepathic powers that allowed them to communicate across vast distances. Maya knew that humanity stood at a crossroads that would determine the fate of their species, and possibly the entire galaxy. They could either master their awakening abilities and use them to defend Earth, or they could allow the power to corrupt them as it had corrupted their Terran ancestors. The choice they made in the coming days would echo across the stars for generations to come. The war was about to begin again, and this time it would be fought by humans who were remembering what they had once been capable of achieving. Maya Torres stood in the center of the training ground that General Patricia Stone had established outside the main survivor camp. Around her, dozens of awakened humans practiced controlling their new abilities under the guidance of Rebecca Park, a former elementary school teacher who had developed powerful telepathic skills. Rebecca could connect the minds of multiple people at once, allowing them to share knowledge and coordinate their actions with perfect precision. The memories had been getting stronger from Maya over the past week. Each night brought dreams that felt more real than her waking hours. She saw herself commanding massive starships that could destroy planets with single weapon strikes. She remembered the faces of alien species that had begged for mercy before Terran armies. Most disturbing of all, she remembered enjoying the fear and submission of conquered peoples. Dr. Kate Sullivan approached Maya with a tablet displaying the latest genetic analysis results. The awakening process was accelerating beyond anything they had predicted. Nearly half of the surviving humans on Earth now showed signs of genetic activation, and their abilities were developing at an exponential rate. Kate warned that the sociological effects of accessing ancestral memories were becoming a serious concern. Counselor Nalthera arrived at the camp that morning with a delegation of senior elven diplomats. Unlike Zarathol, who had grown to care about the human survivors, Nalthera viewed the awakening humans with obvious fear and disgust. She carried ancient records that contained detailed accounts of Terran atrocities committed across the galaxy thousands of years ago. Rebecca Park gathered the awakened humans around Nalthera as the elf counselor began to read from the historical documents. The records described how Terran forces had enslaved the crystal beings of Vexter and forced them to mine their own homeworld until the planet became uninhabitable. They told of entire star systems where Terran genetic experiments had created hybrid species designed specifically for slavery and entertainment. Amy Chen listened to these accounts with growing horror. The 12-year-old girl had been having dreams similar to Maya's, but in her visions, she saw the war from the perspective of the conquered species. Amy experienced the terror of alien children hiding from Terran soldiers and the despair of parents, watching their offspring taken away for experimentation. The memories felt as real as her own childhood experiences. Maya felt a surge of anger toward Nalthera for sharing these disturbing records with Amy and the other young awakened humans. Without thinking, she reached out with her mind and made the elf's tablet explode in a shower of sparks. The demonstration of power silenced the entire gathering and caused several elven guards to reach for their weapons. Zerotho quickly stepped between Maya and the elven delegation. She reminded everyone that the current situation was different from ancient history. The awakened humans were fighting to defend their homeworld rather than conquering other species. Zarathal argued that humanity deserved a chance to prove they could use their abilities responsibly. Nalthera rejected this argument with cold certainty. She explained that genetic memories were not just informational records, but actual personality imprints from ancient Terrans. As the awakening progressed, modern humans would begin to think and act more like their violent ancestors. The counselor predicted that humanity would resume its career of galactic conquest within a generation. Rebecca Park used her telepathic abilities to connect with the other awakened humans in the camp. Through this mental network, she could feel the confusion and fear that Nalthera's words had created. Some of the awakened were beginning to question whether they should suppress their abilities rather than risk becoming monsters. Others felt resentment toward the elves for keeping the truth about human heritage secret for so long. Dr. Sullivan presented her latest research findings to the assembled group. She had discovered that the genetic awakening was not uniform across all humans. People who had stronger emotional connections to family and community seemed better able to resist the influence of ancestral memories. Those who were isolated or traumatized by the war were more likely to be overwhelmed by Terran personality patterns. Maya closed her eyes and reached out with her enhanced senses to feel the approach of the Zirathi fleet. The alien ships were still days away from Earth, but their hostile intent created a psychic pressure that all awakened humans could detect. She could sense Veltar, the Zarathi war chief, broadcasting his hatred across space like a beacon of pure malice. Amy Chen suddenly stepped forward and addressed both the human and elven representatives. Despite her young age, her words carried the weight of someone who had seen too much suffering. Amy said that she understood why the galaxy feared the return of the Terrans, but she also knew that the current awakening was different from the ancient empire. The girl explained that the Zirathi bombardment had not just activated dormant genes but had also created new neural pathways that connected awakened humans to each other. This telepathic network meant that no individual could become a tyrant without being influenced by the collective conscience of their species. Amy believed that this change might allow humanity to avoid repeating the mistakes of their ancestors. Nalthera listened to Annie's words with skeptical attention before responding that the ancient Terrans had also possessed telepathic abilities. The counselor claimed that shared consciousness had not prevented them from becoming conquerors, but had instead made their empire more efficient and ruthless. She warned that the awakened humans would eventually use their mental connections to coordinate galactic domination. Maya felt a moment of doubt as she considered Nalthera's warnings. The ancestral memories were becoming harder to distinguish from her own thoughts. Sometimes she caught herself planning military strategies for conquering alien worlds or designing weapons that could crack planets in half. The hunger for power that came with these memories was intoxicating and difficult to resist. Rebecca Park announced that she had been in telepathic contact with awakened humans in other survivor camps around the world. The reports were both encouraging and troubling. Many groups had successfully organized themselves into effective fighting units capable of defending against Zerathi scouts. However, some camps had experienced internal conflicts when awakened individuals tried to establish dominance over normal humans. General Stone made a decision that surprised everyone present. She ordered the Elven delegation to leave Earth immediately and take their warnings with them. Stone declared that humanity would face the coming battle without alien assistance or interference. She said that humans had the right to determine their own destiny, regardless of what their ancestors had done thousands of years ago. Zerathal protested this decision, arguing that the elves could provide valuable support against the fleet. She had grown to care about the human survivors and wanted to help them survive the coming assault. Maya could see the genuine concern in the elf's silver eyes, but she also understood General Stone's reasoning as the elven ships departed. From Earth's orbit, Maya felt a sense of isolation settle over the planet. Humanity was now truly alone in facing the Zerathi extermination fleet. The awakened humans would have to prove themselves in battle while simultaneously fighting against the darker impulses that came with their genetic heritage. The training sessions became more intense as the Zerathi fleet drew closer to Earth. Maya worked with Rebecca to develop combat techniques that combined individual abilities with telepathic coordination. They discovered that awakened humans could share not just thoughts but also skills and experiences, allowing novices to fight with the expertise of veterans. Dr. Sullivan continued her research into the genetic awakening process, hoping to find ways to enhance the positive aspects while suppressing the dangerous personality patterns. She made a disturbing discovery when she analyzed brain scans from the most powerful awakened humans. The ancient Terran memories were not just accessible, but were actually overriding modern, human personalities. In some cases, Maya knew that time was running out for humanity. To prove that they could master their abilities without becoming the monsters that the galaxy remembered, the Zerathi fleet would arrive within days, and the battle would determine whether awakened humans would use their power to defend their world, or to begin a new age of conquest that would make their ancestors' empires seem gentle by comparison. The ghosts of what humanity had been were rising from their genetic graves, and Maya wondered if her species would have the strength to bury them again after the war was won. The Zerathi fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts blocking out the stars. Admiral Sandra Cross watched from the command center, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, as her instruments detected over 300 alien warships, taking positions around Earth. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built, armed with the same energy weapons that had killed 3 billion people in the first assault. Maya Torres stood on the surface of the Colorado Plateau, her enhanced senses allowing her to perceive the alien fleet despite the vast distance. Around her, nearly 1,000 awakened humans had gathered for what everyone knew would be the final battle for Earth. The genetic memories flowing through Maya's mind provided detailed knowledge of Zerathi technology and tactics, though this information came with the disturbing thoughts of ancient Terran commanders. Rebecca Park used her telepathic abilities to link all the awakened humans into a single consciousness network. Through this connection, Maya could feel the fear and determination of her fellow defenders. She could also sense the darker emotions that the ancestral memories brought with them. Some of the awakened were eager for violence in ways that reminded her uncomfortably of the Terran Empire's bloodthirsty nature. Dr. Kate Sullivan had established a mobile research station to monitor the awakened humans during the battle. Her latest findings were deeply troubling. The stress of combat was accelerating the genetic awakening process beyond safe limits. Several awakened humans had already begun showing signs of complete personality replacement by ancient Terran memories. Kate feared that humanity might win the battle, only to lose their essential humanity in the process. Amy Chen remained at the survivor camp with the normal humans and the few awakened who were still learning to control their abilities. The 12-year-old girl had become the emotional anchor for the telepathic network, using her innocence and compassion to help the others resist the violent impulses that came with their genetic heritage. Amy's role was crucial because she could access Terran memories without being corrupted by them. Colonel Janet Moore led a strike team of military awakened who had developed abilities focused on combat and tactics. These individuals could move faster than bullets, survive direct hits from energy weapons, and coordinate their actions with perfect precision through the telepathic link. However, Maya noticed that Moore's team was also the most affected by Terran personality patterns. The Zerathi bombardment began, without warning, as dozens of energy beams struck the planet's surface. Maya felt the impacts through her enhanced connection to Earth itself. The attacks were targeting population centers and infrastructure, but this time the awakened humans were ready. Groups of defenders teleported directly into the path of the energy beams, absorbing the destructive force and converting it into raw power for their abilities. Krikstar, the Zerathi scientist aboard the command ship, studied the human response with growing alarm. His species had faced awakened Terrans before, but these humans were demonstrating capabilities that exceeded the ancient empire's records. The ability to absorb and redirect energy attacks was new, as was the level of coordination they achieved through their telepathic network. Maya led a group of awakened humans in a direct assault on the orbital fleet, using abilities that defied physics. They launched themselves from Earth's surface and traveled through space without ships or protective suits. The genetic memories provided knowledge of techniques that allowed biological beings to survive in vacuum and travel faster than light, using only their enhanced biology. The battle in space was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Awakened humans moved through the Zerathi fleet like living weapons, tearing through alien hulls and systems with their bare hands. Maya found herself using combat techniques that she had never learned but remembered from the genetic memories of ancient Terran warriors. The efficiency of her attacks was both impressive and terrifying. Admiral Cross coordinated the defense from her underground command center, but she quickly realized that the awakened humans no longer needed military leadership. They were fighting as a single organism through their telepathic connection, adapting to Zerathi tactics faster than any computer could calculate responses. The Admiral began to wonder whether humanity was winning the battle or being replaced by something else entirely. Rebecca Park struggled to maintain the emotional balance of the telepathic network as the awakened humans engaged in intense combat. The violence was triggering a flood of ancient memories filled with conquest and domination. Several members of the network were beginning to talk about pursuing the retreating Zerathi ships and enslaving their homeworld, rather than simply defending Earth. Maya boarded the Zerathi command ship and made her way toward the bridge where Supreme Admiral Vexanel was coordinating the alien assault. The genetic memories guided her through the ship's corridors and provided detailed knowledge of Zerathi psychology and weaknesses. She could feel the ancient Terran personality patterns growing stronger with each alien she killed. Dr. Sullivan detected massive spikes in brain activity from all the awakened humans participating in the space battle. The combat stress was causing rapid evolution of their abilities, but it was also accelerating the replacement of human personalities with Terran consciousness patterns. Kate realized that humanity might technically win the war while losing their species identity completely. Amy Chen used her connection to the telepathic network to send waves of calming emotion toward the space fighters. The young girl served as a reminder of what humanity could be at its best. But her influence was weakening as the ancient memories grew stronger in the other awakened. Amy could feel the network beginning to fracture between those who wanted to remain human and those who embraced their Terran heritage. The Zerathi fleet began to retreat as their losses mounted beyond acceptable levels. Supreme Admiral Vex had never encountered enemies who could board ships through vacuum and tear apart advanced technology with biological abilities alone. his tactical computers could not devise effective countermeasures against opponents who adapted and evolved during combat. Maya confronted Dexanol on his command bridge, and the alien admiral finally understood what his species was truly facing. The awakened humans were not just defending their planet but were becoming something that could threaten the entire galaxy. Dexanol transmitted a final message to the Zerathi homeworld, warning them that the ancient Terrans had returned and were more dangerous than ever. Colonel Moore's strike team had completely cleared 3 Zerathi ships and was demanding to pursue the retreating fleet to their home system through the telepathic network. Maya could feel Moore's personality being overwhelmed by memories of Terran generals who had conquered hundreds of worlds. The colonel was no longer thinking about defending Earth, but about establishing a new galactic empire. Rebecca Park sent an urgent telepathic message to all members of the network. She warned them that the genetic awakening was proceeding too quickly, and that many awakened humans were losing themselves to ancient personality patterns. Rebecca begged everyone to remember who they had been before the abilities manifested, and to hold on to their essential humanity. Dr. Sullivan made a desperate attempt to contact the awakened fighters through her communication equipment. Her analysis showed that the battle stress had triggered changes that might be irreversible. Several awakened humans were already showing brain patterns identical to ancient Terran consciousness structures. Kate feared that humanity was winning the battle, at the cost of becoming the very enemy the galaxy had spent millennia trying to forget. Maya felt the Terran memories surge through her mind as she stood over the defeated Zerathi admiral. Ancient voices whispered suggestions about conquering alien worlds and establishing human dominance across the galaxy. The power flowing through her body was intoxicating, and the genetic memories promised that she could become a goddess among the stars if she embraced her true heritage. The battle for Earth was nearly won, but Maya realized that the real war was just beginning. The question was no longer whether humanity could defeat their alien enemies, but whether they could defeat the monsters that victory was turning them into. Maya Torres stood over Supreme Admiral Vexanal as the Zerathi commander lay dying on his command bridge. Around her, the alien fleet was in full retreat, their ships damaged, and their crews terrified by the impossible power of the awakened humans. Maya felt the genetic memories of ancient Terran victories flooding her consciousness, and for a moment she understood the intoxicating pleasure that her ancestors had felt when conquering inferior species. The telepathic network, connecting all awakened humans, suddenly exploded with new voices, as the battle stress triggered mass awakenings across Earth. Rebecca Park felt her mind nearly overwhelmed by the flood of new consciousness joining the collective. Millions of humans were experiencing genetic activation simultaneously, their abilities manifesting at levels that exceeded anything previously recorded. Amy Chen sat in the survivor camp, her young face twisted with concentration as she tried to maintain emotional stability within the expanding telepathic network. Through her connection to the collective consciousness, she could feel awakened humans appearing on every continent. Their combined power was becoming so vast that the planet itself seemed to pulse with new energy. Dr. Kate Sullivan watched in horror as her monitoring equipment registered impossible readings from awakened humans around the world. The mass activation was not following any pattern that medical science could explain. People were developing abilities that allowed them to manipulate matter at the atomic level, travel instantly across vast distances, and interface directly with electronic systems through thought alone. Colonel Janet Moore had taken control of an entire Zerathi battlecruiser and was using its communication systems to coordinate attacks on the retreating alien fleet through the telepathic network. She transmitted tactical information that allowed other awakened humans to appear directly inside enemy ships across the solar system. Moore no longer remembered her human identity and thought only in terms of conquest and expansion. Maya felt the moment when her assault on the Zerathi command ship triggered a cascade effect that awakened every remaining human on Earth. The planet became a beacon of psychic energy that could be detected across the galaxy. She realized that humanity had just announced its return to galactic prominence in a way that would terrify every alien civilization that remembered the ancient Terran Empire. Admiral Sandra Cross received reports from monitoring stations around the world that confirmed her worst fears. The awakened humans were no longer following military command structures or responding to government authority. They were organizing themselves according to patterns that resembled the hierarchical structure of the ancient Terran Empire, with the most powerful individuals naturally assuming leadership roles. Rebecca Park used every ounce of her telepathic strength to broadcast a message through the collective consciousness. She reminded all awakened humans of their families, their hopes for the future, and their duty to protect rather than conquer. Rebecca could feel her influence weakening as more ancient personality patterns activated, but she refused to give up her fight for humanity's soul. Zarathal detected the massive psychic disturbance from her position aboard an elven ship at the edge of the solar system. The elf immediately transmitted an emergency message to the Celestial Dominion, informing them that the ancient Terrans had not just returned, but had evolved beyond their previous capabilities. The elven fleet began preparing for immediate departure from human space. Amy Chen made a desperate decision that would determine the fate of both humanity and the galaxy. Using her unique position as the emotional anchor of the telepathic network, she began sharing her memories of human kindness and compassion with every awakened mind. The 12-year-old girl flooded the collective consciousness with images of parents caring for children, teachers helping students, and communities working together to survive disasters. Maya felt Amy's influence like a cool breeze cutting through the burning anger of Terran memories. For a moment, she remembered her life as a marine biologist and her dedication to protecting ocean ecosystems. The contrast between her scientific passion and the conquest fantasies flowing through her mind was stark enough to create a moment of clarity. Dr. Sullivan detected a remarkable change in the brain patterns of awakened humans who were most strongly connected to Amy's telepathic influence. The ancient Terran personality patterns were not disappearing, but they were being balanced by strengthened human emotional centers. Kate realized that Amy had discovered a way to integrate the genetic memories without being overwhelmed by them. Supreme Admiral Vexenel used his final breath to activate a subspace transmitter that would warn the entire galaxy about the return of the Terrans. His message described awakened humans who could appear anywhere in space without ships, absorb energy weapons without harm, and coordinate their actions across impossible distances. The transmission painted humanity as a threat that required immediate galactic intervention. Colonel Moore felt Amy's emotional influence attempting to reach her through the telepathic network, but the ancient memories had already gained too strong a hold on her consciousness. She rejected the human emotional patterns and instead embraced the tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency of Terran military commanders. Moore began planning an assault on the Zirathi homeworld that would serve as humanity's announcement of their return to galactic dominance. Maya made her choice in the ruins of the Zirathi command bridge. She reached out through the telepathic network and joined her will with Amy's effort to preserve human compassion within the collective consciousness. Together, they began building emotional barriers that would prevent the ancient personality patterns from completely overwhelming modern human identities. Rebecca Park felt the balance of the telepathic network shift as more awakened humans chose to embrace Amy and Maya's vision rather than surrender to Terran conquest fantasies. The collective consciousness began to stabilize around a new pattern that incorporated both human empathy and ancient power. This hybrid identity was unlike anything that had existed during the original Terran Empire. The last Zirathi ships fled beyond the outer planets, carrying news of humanity's transformation to every corner of the galaxy. Within hours, alien civilizations that had not communicated for centuries were sharing intelligence about the threat posed by awakened humans. Ancient defense pacts were renewed, and new alliances formed as species that had once been enemies united against the return of their common nightmare. Dr. Sullivan published her final research report on the genetic awakening process. She concluded that humanity had evolved into something entirely new, combining the enhanced abilities of their Terran ancestors with emotional and ethical development that the ancient empire had lacked. Whether this evolution would lead to protection or conquest of other species remained to be determined. Amy Chen collapsed from exhaustion after maintaining her telepathic influence for nearly 12 hours. The young girl had successfully prevented the complete replacement of human consciousness by ancient memories, but the cost had been enormous. Amy aged years in a single day and would never again be able to live as a normal child. Maya stood in the ruined command center of the Zerathi flagship and looked out at the stars through the shattered viewports. She could sense awakened humans throughout the solar system, their abilities growing stronger with each passing hour. The genetic memories whispered suggestions about expanding beyond Earth to reclaim the galaxy that had once belonged to their ancestors. Admiral Cross received final reports from monitoring stations around the world before they went offline, one by one. The awakened humans were dismantling government communication networks and replacing them with telepathic connections that normal humans could not access. Humanity was dividing into two species, and the enhanced individuals would inevitably become the dominant group. Zarathul watched from the bridge of her fleeing ship as the last elven vessels left the solar system. She transmitted a final message to Maya through subspace communication, expressing her hope that awakened humanity would choose a different path than their ancestors. The elf's words carried both fear and desperate optimism for a species that had once been her friends. The awakened humans gathered on Earth's surface as their planet healed itself through their collective will. Radiation disappeared from the bombed cities, the atmosphere cleared of pollutants, and new growth sprouted from soil that had been sterile for months. Maya realized that humanity now possessed the power to transform not just themselves but entire worlds. Rebecca Park established the new telepathic protocols that would govern awakened human society. The collective consciousness would prevent any individual from becoming a tyrant, but it would also coordinate their expansion beyond Earth. Humanity would return to the stars, and the galaxy would have to decide whether to welcome them as protectors or resist them as conquerors. Maya felt the genetic memories of her ancestors flowing through the telepathic network, carrying knowledge of technologies and techniques that could reshape civilization. The ancient Terrans had been monsters, but they had also been innovators and explorers. Perhaps awakened humanity could harness their power while avoiding their cruelty. As the first awakened humans began preparing for interstellar travel using only their enhanced biology, Maya wondered whether the galaxy would learn to fear them or learn to hope in them. Earth had unleashed what it had buried, and now the universe would discover whether 3 billion graves had taught humanity wisdom, or simply made them more efficient killers. The war for Earth was over, but the war for the soul of humanity had just begun.